I was over at Shining Force Central the other day when somebody proposed an interesting challenge. Complete Shining Force 2 without healing. Intrigued, I gave it a try for myself. Join me as I attempt to tackle this challenge. Let's open with the rules. Number 1. No HP restoration during battle. Reviving fallen units and healing status effects is allowed, but HP cannot be replenished during battle. Number 2. The boost spell is prohibited, including the use effect of the Protect Ring. Number 3. No save scumming. To be transparent though, I admit that I did use save states a little bit, but not to cheese the game. I only used them for the sake of confirmation, such as ascertaining a battle's leader when I couldn't remember for sure, or reminding myself of certain enemy resistances. Number 4. Units must promote at level 20. Number 5. Random battles and fairy woods are off limits, as is fleeing from any battle after performing any actions that gain experience points. Number 6. Losing a battle requires reloading from the last save point. With the rules squared away, I set the difficulty to ouch, headed to school, then my friends and I followed our teacher, Sir Astral, as an excuse to explore the castle. We overheard that he was summoned to investigate the ancient tower after it opened during an ominous storm, then get dragged along to assist him. After grabbing the first piece of mithril, devils appear in the tower. Our first battle begins. Aside from playing with slightly greater caution than normal, this battle was a standard affair. I counted spaces and stuck to high land effect tiles whenever reasonable, which would become the norm throughout this run. If I don't specify, just assume that most battles are approached by leading with my tanks while sticking to high land effect areas whenever possible. Aside from Chester struggling against one gizmo near the end, nothing of note happened during this opening fight. The lead gizmo fled, then we were tasked with retrieving Howl, a historian who should be able to shed some light on what's happening with the ancient tower. In town, I sold my healing items and bought some new gear. I won't be updating you every time I get new items or gear, not unless it's worth mentioning, like giving Jaha a quick chicken to raise his agility, helping ensure that he can lead the charge as a tank. Second battle. Chester got roughed up early on. Thanks to a lucky counterattack and critical hit, I tore through the second wave of enemies after struggling a bit with the first. Advancing on the final group, I stuck to the trees and tall grass for safety while trying to position so that the monsters would attack from the normal grass. This would have worked, but an unfortunate crit brought Bowie down to kill range before I could take them out. Shining Force 2 is one of those games where a game over halves your money, but you keep all of your levels and story progress. Because of this challenge's rules, I'm forced to instead reload my last save and retry the battle fresh. The second attempt transpired without a hitch. Nothing to say about it. Passing through Yield, I met up with Howl's apprentice, Kazin, then marched to the next battle. Sticking to the trees, this battle was uneventful. Sarah was teetering on imminent defeat, incited by missing a giant bat with consecutive attacks. Jaha saved her, but she later fell anyway when I tried feeding her an ooze near the end. Howl was killed by soldiers of the Kingdom of Gallum, who came to steal his notes. With his dying breath, he spoke of a devil sealed inside the tower, and the jewels that were the key to that seal. Then tasked Kazin with finding those jewels in order to reseal the tower. Kazin joins the team, and our departure was immediately intercepted by Gallum soldiers. I took an early risk to score Sarah a much-needed kill. Healing magic may be disallowed, but that doesn't make Sarah useless. I still want her leveled up for her other spells, not to mention the long-term payoff of promoting her to a Master Monk. While that risk did pay off, it was perhaps because of it that I lost Chester rather early on, then Bowie was dropped to critical health about halfway through. Deliberate feeding was a lot trickier when you can't heal to compensate for allowing extra attacks through. As the battle was winding down, some of those injuries also led to the defeat of Kazin and Sarah. But Jaha is so durable at this point thanks to his solid level, he carried us through the last couple foes. Despite standing triumphant, we're imprisoned by the enemy force. In our cell, we learned that the king is planning to invade Grand Seal, Gallum's allied nation and our home kingdom. We're also introduced to Slade, the man responsible for stealing the jewels that broke the ancient tower's seal. As an act of making amends for his mistake, Slade breaks us out of our cell and agrees to help get the jewels back from King Gallum. Not only are we too late to stop the invasion, but we're intercepted by the guards on our way out of the castle. Using Jaha as a decoy, Chester and Kazan worked together perfectly for arranging a couple more kills for Sarah, followed by a third by surrounding an archer. Alas, in focusing on getting Bowie his own kill on the mage that I had set up, the knight swiftly took him out because of a combination of getting a second turn shortly after his previous turn, and damage from the wizard resultant of waiting for Bowie to score said kill. My next attempt started similar, but this time I didn't make the mistake of holding out for Bowie to kill the mage, and managed to wall off the knight from reaching him, allowing me to take out the remaining targets, then have Bowie deliver the finishing blow. I retrieved the Jewel of Light, but King Gallum took the other jewel into battle. The jewel fused onto Bowie's neck, and Slade joined our party to help ensure that we retrieve the Jewel of Evil to undo the damage he caused. Aside from losing Slade early on, the pursuit of the invading army was pretty easy. Although as Bowie's HP was again reduced to kill range, I was beginning to realize that one of the greatest obstacles of this run may wind up being maintaining an adequate level with Bowie. Involving him in combat is too dangerous when his HP drops low, which happens quickly because of his middling defense value, depriving him of taking the same risks as everyone else for gaining experience and levels. I arrived at Grand Seal, recruited Kiwi, then pursued King Gallum into the ancient tower. There, it's discovered that the evil Gizmo had possessed Gallum's body, who in turn has taken Princess Ellis of Grand Seal hostage. After Gallum and Astral exhaust each other in an epic duel deserving of the greatest battles of ease, the Shining Force steps forward to rescue the princess. Due to a double attack, Kazan fell to the opening cluster of knights and archers. Slade narrowly avoided suffering a similar fate. 3 units fell to the dark smokes, and Bowie was dropped to low HP that demanded he again be pulled to safety. Thankfully, the endurance of Jaha and Kiwi were enough to slowly overpower the remaining enemies. I tried feeding the last dark smoke to Kiwi, but it got 3 attacks before Kiwi could get his next turn, leaving the winning blow in Jaha's hands. Bowie attempted to rescue the princess as King Gallum was spiriting her away. The villain managed to escape, but not before Bowie nabbed the Jewel of Evil from him. Suddenly, the tower quaked! With Bowie leading the way, everyone fled to the port, narrowly escaping before Grand Seal was swallowed by an enormous chasm. The people of Grand Seal sailed to the continent of Promisia. There they got to work building a new town. During construction, a man arrived in a panic over a friend who hadn't yet returned from North Cliff. Turns out, that area was a wicked witch's territory. Playing this battle by ear, the party wound up splitting off into 2 groups. Chester fell while I was trying to feed a goblin to Bowie. As the fighting dragged on, HP levels were gradually diminishing, but thanks to questionable witch AI not using magic, it wasn't too bad. I never really felt threatened thanks to Jaha and Kiwi, even as some of my other units began to fall. The man was saved, and we returned home. 1 year passed. In that time, new Grand Seal was built into a fine town, although they were still in need of trade routes. I grabbed the warrior pride from HQ and the cheerful bread that I immediately fed to Bowie. In town, people were gathering to see a strange talking bird. Turns out that bird was a phoenix with connections to Volcanon, the god who created the earth. He stopped by Grand Seal because he hurt his wing and needed help getting back home. That duty was passed on to me, to escort Peter back home to Mount Volcano, and, if possible, extend goodwill from Grand Seal along the way to establish trade routes and allies. The quest to Bordeaux was rather uneventful. I gave the power ring to May and used a protect-milk on Bowie. There were a small number of close calls, like when a vampire bat attacked Chester instead of blasting 4 targets with Blaze Level 2. And here, when May saved Peter's hide after a missed attack on his part imperiled him. But until I met Volcanon, who berated humanity for unleashing the Devil King Xeon onto the world, battles were pretty simple to clear. I grabbed the quick ring for Kiwi and rescued Screech from falling to his death. By King Bedeau's suggestion, I made my way down to Polka to get a boat so that I may make my way to meet an ex-Greater Devil by the name of Creed. He should supposedly be able to help us deal with Zeon. Prince Luke had flown ahead to see that a ship was prepared for our departure. Alas, remnants of the Devil army that had just attempted to invade Bedeau were causing trouble. Joined by the local wolfman Gerald, a fight to liberate the peaceful town commenced. Enemies were getting stronger faster than my party was growing. Jaha was starting to fall off as the impregnable wall he once was. Thankfully, Kiwi was there to back him up. His toughness was still plenty for baiting physical attacks. Thanks to their shared effort combined with advantageous use of the terrain, I conquered this battle with ease. Circling around the eastern side of town to thin the enemy forces a bit, then heading back around to the north where I'd have more room to take on the remainders. Luke joined the team, to whom I passed the power ring. I also picked up the company of a blinded boy named Adler, who had stumbled from the mountain following Volcanon's expulsion of the Devil invasion of Bedeau. He'll be with us for a while, but can't participate in battle. Postponing fighting Kraken, I set out to get the Achilles sword, ensuring that I'll be as prepared as possible for taking on the game's first true boss. Given that I'm not allowed to heal, I figure having a few more levels under my belt before confronting Kraken would be all the more valuable. Acquiring the Achilles sword involved overcoming 2 battles. The first was uneventful, and I was prepared to write off the second as well, but then I wound up in a bad spot. While trying to fix that mess, enemy reinforcements were slowly encroaching from behind. Luckily, even after being healed, Peter was able to soar over the congestion to slay the Master Mage before he could decimate us with a second Blaze level 2. After that, I started getting the situation under control. Hit points were getting low and I had lost Kiwi for baiting, but I ultimately pulled through. With the Achilles sword, it was time to confront Kraken. Relying on ranged combatants and thoughtful positioning, the battle started out favorably. Once the Kraken arms got involved, this started slowly deteriorating, including some miscalculations on my part, the most painful of which lost Peter before the head could be engaged. Fortunately, the power ring held up for multiple uses. Chester and Geralt were able to both engage the head while powered up to inflict heavy damage. At least they would have if Geralt hadn't missed. A miss that cost me some units, but not the battle. I did everything in Hassan, including showing Rode the Achilles sword so he would accompany the journey to Taro's shrine to retrieve the caravan, a vehicle that we require to reach Creed's mansion. The overall toughness of the party was becoming more viable for enduring long battles, even if the actual tanks couldn't take the beating they once could. This battle was thereby easily conquered. The only units I lost were Peter and Geralt, and Peter only fell because he and Luke split off from the main group to intercept the monsters coming in from the north. Kiwi's level was starting to fall behind, but I was okay with that. His level ups until now were mostly so he could protect the party until I inevitably remove him. As is, he would suffice until that time came. After promoting Luke, I proceeded to Taro's shrine. Only Bowie can hurt Taros, presenting an immediate problem. Comparing their stats, they had similar attack strength, but Taros had superior defense and HP while also getting 2 turns every round. Fortunately, the power ring can augment Bowie's strength, and the Taros AI is susceptible to decoys. I just needed to take care that I reached him with enough endurance to survive while Bowie whittled him down. A task that wasn't made any easier by frequently missing attacks and spells, but was pulled off through careful planning. With the caravan acquired, we were able to make our way southwest along the Rocky River, right after recruiting Rick, then promoting Bowie, Chester, and Slade. The next battle wasn't difficult, but was made tricky by focusing on catching up with everyone who wasn't yet promoted, without depriving them of experience points by using my already promoted units. Normally, this is an easy task, but typical decoy and feeding tactics have diminished longevity when I can't heal. Kazan almost disastrously fell early in the fight, but thanks to Kiwi and my promoted units serving as walls whenever possible, my stragglers slowly yet surely reached level 20. I had to rely on some combat from my promoted units, but did my best to restrict that to high threat targets when few others were in attack range, and cleaning up when I had no stragglers remaining. I promoted everyone except Kiwi, who doesn't concern me since the next battle will be his last. I went Master Monk with Sarah for increased attack power, Wizard with Kazan for the utility of Muddle and Dispel, and Gladiator with Jaha to prioritize defense over offense. The next battle had a tricky opening. With few good positioning options available, I did my best to advance and retaliate without seriously compromising myself. Kiwi, Luke, and Peter stayed behind when one Harpy advanced from the rear, while everyone else engaged the second enemy wave. This phase of the battle was pretty rough. Even with advantageous land effect, these enemies hit hard. There were also the trees and cliffs to contend against, which partially split my party and made it difficult to surround enemy units. But my numbers and tactics were nevertheless superior, allowing me to slowly whittle the enemy down despite having to fight them on their terms. As thanks for saving him, Elric joined the party, meaning it's time to say goodbye to Kiwi. He admirably did his job getting us through the first half of the game's battles, but sticking with him would eventually become a liability. I promoted Elric into a brass gunner, favoring defense over speed and mobility, handed the quick ring back to Jaha, fed my power water to Elric, then proceeded through the hidden cave by Elric's guidance. My party wound up inadvertently divided between north and south. Playing the whole thing by ear, I didn't exactly put much planning into balancing my two squads. Between that and some general misfortune, the South encountered some trouble they managed to overcome. As did the North, although between a double crit from Bowie and an enemy mage smacking one guy with a stick instead of 4 with magic, that squad simply had far better luck. Once the battle wound down to the home stretch, the two halves of my force converged to engage the final group, making sure to grab the Protect Ring in the process, which I handed straight to Bowie. The rules may disallow using it as an item, but equipping it still provides protection for my most important character. Without an appointment, entry into Creed's mansion was denied. Attempting to circumvent that only got us shrunken by a magic spell, adding us to Creed's collection living in the Desktop Kingdom. In order to leave, I must first best the King's army in combat. I took this battle very slowly, positioning my units to receive the enemies as they trickled to my side of the board, advancing only as a consequence to fighting back. The power ring cracked early on, but on the plus side I scored plenty of lucky dodges as I slowly retaliated against their advances. As the fighting drew closer to the opposing side, a rook sniped Luke. Engaging would have put me in the middle of their main force. Knowing that was a likely death sentence, I ignored the bait and pulled back to bring them towards me, continuing to balance offense and defense to isolate targets as much as possible without being so passive that I'm not fighting back at all. Losing Kazan and Peter were perhaps the hardest pills to swallow, and with Bowie's HP dropping rather low, recommending that I pull him to safety, both sides were rapidly suffering heavy losses as the climax drew near. Despite outnumbering the enemy, my remaining forces were in rougher shape. Even when the battle was down to 6 versus 1, it was far from over. The king didn't go down easily, and could tear through my weary soldiers one by one with his magic and double turns every round. Despite those odds, after trying and failing to feed the kill to Sarah, I claimed checkmate with Bowie and Rick still standing. After deliberation that had been going on for the last couple battles, I gave Jaha my running pimento, then used the cotton balloon to descend to Floor World. I entered a mouse hole where I was met by a hungry colony of rats. Monsters in this battle hit hard, resulting in a few casualties, but overall this battle was nothing of note. Simple and straightforward. I finally met up with Creed. He reverted our bodies to normal, then after we explained that Xeon has been revived, took us to speak with Evil Spirit. From him, we learned that the Devil Army is invading North Parmesia, before Xeon contacted us through Evil Spirit. He demanded that we bring him the Jewel of Evil in exchange for the life of Princess Ellis. I chose Randolph for my Creed recruit, whom I would be promoting into a Baron, giving my party another defense-heavy unit. I removed Luke, which was a shame since he boasted my highest level, and grabbed the running ring to give to Randolph. We said goodbye to Adler, passed Luke's power ring to Sarah, then returned to Grand Seal. Bowie and Peter brought everyone up to speed on the situation, including that Ellis is still alive. Knowing that action must be taken, Astral joined the team as an advisor and set a course to speak with the storytellers of Tristan in North Parmesia. I fed Randolph my brave apple to level him up, then Janet joined the team. However, I won't be using her, and much like how I've omitted many treasure and equipment acquisitions, I won't mention future recruits unless I add them to the active party, or there's a reason to mention them that's pertinent to summarizing the story. Jaha provided a strong start by enduring multiple early hits, an opening that backfired when Bowie stepped up to offer him protection, getting himself beaten up by a skeleton in Jaha's place, who then managed to circle around and take out Jaha anyway, sacrificing half of Bowie's HP for nothing, which escalated into the looming threat of the lesser demons. Their high mobility and Blaze level 3 magic was a threatening combination that eliminated Geralt, but my main concern was ensuring they couldn't swoop in to blast several units at once. Ultimately, I suffered my first loss since Grand's Island, due to Bowie taking heavy hits stacked atop his failed attempt at shielding Jaha. Acknowledging that part of why I lost was the pressure from those ever-looming demons up north, I sent a capable squad to intercept them so my main force wouldn't feel surrounded. A simple change in tactics that earned me a rather easy victory. Using dynamite and a cannon, the cave-in blocking our path was obliterated. Smitten by the power of that weapon, Road realized that he could use it to help us in battle. Road officially joined the Shining Force, replacing May in my active party, choosing to replace the glass cannon with an archer who can take a bit more abuse. Leading the charge with Jaha and Randolph whenever possible, the cave battle was uneventful. I lost a few units, but that alone doesn't qualify as interesting since I lost units in just about every battle. As was the next battle as we interrupted Geshup's harassment of the Pakalon Knights. With careful positioning that stayed mindful of the immense range of the lesser demons, this battle was made easy by how spread out everything is. I did lose Jaha near the end because I got a bit bold, but nothing truly noteworthy occurred. I passed through Pakalon, a kingdom suffering from a severe drought due to devil activity in Tristan. Specifically, something must have happened to the goddess Mitchella. With her shrine already at our destination, we might as well investigate when we arrive. After using a cheerful bread on Jaha, I continued northward towards Tristan. Now, at this point, I forgot to hit the record button, meaning I didn't capture footage for the next two battles. For the sake of the challenge's authenticity, I had no interest in redoing them even if I could. Thankfully, I've been taking notes as I go. So for the next two battles, since I can't reference any footage for writing the script, I'm simply going to recite straight from my notes. I started off swinging, which nearly cost Slade his life. At one point, I took a risk by breaking Rick ahead to confront three foes, a maneuver I quickly backed up with Slade to draw attacks since he already had one foot in the grave. Not to mention was already my highest level unit, making him my most expendable when it came to needing further growth. According to plan, Slade was felled, setting me up to defeat the enemy wizard before taking any magic damage. A bishop then didn't heal a lizard man for some reason, leaving him at Rhodes' mercy. Geralt was brought into death range by a wyvern, but Elric quickly put himself between him and a lizard man for protection. Things started heating up in the home stretch. Nothing I couldn't handle, but there was a bit of pressure. But then Kazan cast D-Soul to kill a lizard man who I'd forgotten was the enemy leader, ending the battle early and depriving me of a few additional kills for experience points. Pangoed Valley was next. Randolph baited a wyvern, but his defense was bypassed by fire breath. I kept trying to lure in enemies with hopes of reducing the likelihood of being surrounded on the bridge, but the second wyvern wouldn't be coaxed. So I sent Peter, strengthened by the power ring, to engage in an aerial duel while everyone else advanced towards the bridge. Recklessness got Jaha and Randolph blasted, Randolph barely holding on, which would have been handled just fine if not for multiple missed attacks, allowing the lesser demon a second turn to defeat Randolph. With one tank already down, extra care was needed when approaching the flowers on the bridge. Even Jaha, my best tank, could only endure 2 or 3 hits from them, so I did my best to lure them in with characters who still had plenty of hit points to spare. Bowie's health was brought low by a counterattack, so I had to keep him safe as I kept pushing forward. With only a few targets remaining, I slowed and silenced the enemy leader, rendering him mostly helpless while I focused on defeating the remaining targets. The baiting of which worked almost too well, when the last remaining wyvern suddenly flew in and knocked Bowie down to 6 hit points. After that close shave, I had enough firepower to bring the battle to a triumphant end. Arriving at Mitchell's shrine, even my tanks were starting to struggle to survive several hits from certain monsters, but once lured into attack range, so too could I quickly slay them with sheer numbers. I just needed to stay aware of movement ranges and where I placed my units who were already injured. I took some tactical risks, like when Rode had the choice of saving Randolph, but after comparing stats, I decided to have Rode instead attack a different target, with hopes that Randolph would be able to save himself. That move was complemented by Kazan casting Muddle level 2, since his blaze magic would be ineffective against the wyvern. Those risks paid off. Randolph slayed the flower, and confusion lifted some pressure. I continued advancing, when suddenly the enemy leader charged! Not only taking out Geralt and leaving Jaha in peril, but putting me in a really tough spot in regard to defeating every other target first. As my units fell and the monks kept healing themselves with spells they didn't have the MP to afford, the situation only worsened. Eventually, only 5 allies remained, and I needed to resort to blinding the Dark Knight just to take some of the pressure off. Slowly but surely, I whittled them down faster than they were doing to me. The dire situation did eventually stabilize into a victory. Next was the boss battle against Zalbard, the first of Xeon's greater devils. There wasn't much I could do about oncoming flying units, but aside from that I took things slow, fully utilizing the terrain and terrible AI to dispatch as many early foes as I could from outside their trigger range. It went about as well as it could, save for one calculated risk that cost me Kazan. A theoretically big loss, as I was hoping for Kazan to disable the Master Monk with Dispel, preventing him from healing Zalbard in the final act. I continued to advance slowly, taking out enemies as I could, while maintaining a safe distance from the water to not attract Zalbard's bolt magic. Soon enough, he did come in fast with bolt level 2, triggering his own personal guards to become aggressive as well, who I dealt with as they came. I had wanted to blast a couple of them with Bowie's own bolt level 2, but their agility made that too risky of a move, so I simply had Chester kill the Orc King instead. Hoping to coax Zalbard into wasting his MP on single targets, I sent Slade ahead to kill the useless gargoyle while placing him in a compromising position. It worked like a charm. Zalbard blew 2 of his remaining 3 casts on defeating Slade while hurting nobody else. I just had to bait out 1 more and I'd be in a much better position. I assigned Rick to that job, while everyone else was getting ready to ambush the remaining enemy forces when they subsequently came at us. As I defeated the Dark Knight and Master Monk, I noticed something. Even without any magic points, Zalbard refused to cross the water. So I shot him with Elric while he marched around doing nothing for the next few minutes. With Mitchella rescued, she explained that in order to defeat Xeon, we must acquire the holy sword found on Gran's Island, then confront him before he's able to fully recover his strength. Now, even though we came to speak with the storytellers, that's actually completely optional. I ignore them completely and grab the critical sword for Bowie, then recruit Taya, who I originally planned to replace either Sarah or Slade. But despite the nature of this challenge, they've both been impressively pulling their weight. Geralt, on the other hand, not so much. I removed him for Taya instead. Then I grabbed a power water that I used on Rick. I also finally used my bright honeys, which for a long time I was saving for Taya, but now that I had her, I put a bit more thought into it and figured that she'll likely have plenty of MP on her own. So I instead gave one to Bowie and the other to Slade. I did, however, give Taya the Black Ring. Its blaze magic could be useful for blasting groups of enemies, since summon magic inflicts reduced damage against multiple targets. Back in Pakalon, I spoke with Freyja, who had the key for entering the walled-off city of Maun, beyond which was the Nazca ship, which would provide transportation back to Gran's Island. However, when trying to leave with Freyja, we were ambushed by the Devil Army. This battle was a breeze, taking advantage of land effect whenever I could and swapping which characters received damage based on remaining HP values. It was super easy to confront enemies one or two at a time, especially with Rick, Elric, and Rode all starting to develop as decent backup tanks, as was Chester for soaking up magic damage because of his increasingly high HP pool. All it took was a bit of patience, and this went down as perhaps the easiest battle of the entire run, except for probably the Gizmo fight at the very beginning. One more battle before Mound. Aside from taking some heavy damage and ordering Bowie and Randolph to pull ahead to assist Jaro, this battle wasn't too complicated until it came time to approach the enemy's main force. It was a gathering of foes larger than usually demanded of me to confront at once, many of whom possessed movement and attack ranges that were tough to approach. Especially since by the time I reached that point, some of my units lacked the HP to survive the Necromancer's magic. The confrontation kicked off when a boosted Elric fired uselessly upon a Necromancer, followed swiftly by Jaro charging in like a lunatic. As the fighting commenced, Bowie was quickly dropped down to death range. I cast slow to buy him some time, but that failed miserably. Then I had to wrestle with a difficult decision of what to do with Bowie. I really wanted him to zap all 3 targets with Bolt, but could only hit 2 from a higher land effect tile, protection he would need if that Dark Soldier got another attack on him. After literal minutes of deliberation, I settled on all 3, hoping that decision wouldn't backfire. From there, protecting Bowie became my top priority. So focused on that, I didn't realize the horrible mistake committed with my mages until it was happening. Jaro avenged them, but I would have seriously preferred he gone for the Dark Soldier to protect Bowie. Thankfully, Rick came through where Jaro failed. The worst was now behind me. I kept Bowie back while everyone else finished the fight. Freyja opened Mound's gate. Upon seeing the village razed by the Devil Army, he joined us to atone for his sins. He forced himself into the party, and I immediately retreated to remove him. Knowing I couldn't ambush a Necromancer and Bowmaster, Kazan lured in the mage so that I could handle the first group from there. Taya took heavy damage because I miscounted a Dark Soldier's range, which would have been fine had I not made a second mistake with her when circling around to confront the next group, not only costing me Taya, but sparing a Bowmaster that I deliberately didn't attack because I didn't want that Necromancer to hit 4 targets at once. That tussle attracted a couple Dark Soldiers, then a Cerberus, from whom I tactically retreated to fight them on my terms. Once all of that was finished, I circled around to commence the final advance from the south. Before long, an all-out brawl broke out that saw casualties on both sides. With Mound liberated, I recruited Gyan. Minutes of deliberation settled on replacing Sarah with him. I considered Chester or Rode, and Sarah's spells had been decently useful till now. But between Slade, Kazan, and Taya, having Sarah as well was just too many units who couldn't take a hit anymore. With Sarah removed from the party, I handed the power ring over to Randolph, and passed the running ring from him to Gyan. For a boss fight, the battle to claim the Nazca ship was pretty easy. The wide, open battlefield allowed me to focus on either keeping my units just outside of attack range, or luring enemies in with bait standing on solid land effect tiles. Playing every engagement by ear, and splitting the team partway through to divide and conquer. Before I knew it, even Camila had entered the fray but was quickly overwhelmed, especially since she was without a healer who had rushed me earlier in the fight. Boarding the Nazca ship, I handed the Nazca cannon to Rode, then flew back to Grand's Island. To not engage the cluttered welcoming party too soon, I approached slowly, patiently advancing through the forest and tall grass, letting my foes trickle towards me. I kept that up until the Mist Demons initiated their approach. Muddle level 2 was of great concern. Fearing that possibility, I led with Peter into shifting my focus from offense to defense, hoping to intercept any attempt at confusing my units. That's about when shit hit the fan. The Mist Demons never did cast Muddle, but damage was quickly mounting. Through sheer force of will and tactics, I powered through the ensuing brawl, grabbing the heat axe for Gyan along the way. It wasn't easy, nor was it really worth elaborating on its straightforwardness. I took a detour to recruit Claude. who would replace Elric to form my final party. I gave him the remaining running pimento, then proceeded onward to the prism flowers. This could have gone better. By trying to quickly quell other threats, I took numerous unnecessary laser blasts throughout the first half of the fight, some of which proved quite useful. Once things were settled down, I methodically pruned the lingering flowers from outside their reach, then readied to wrap things up. At least that was the plan. But when the shaman unexpectedly leapt at a chance to eliminate Kazan, I was pressured into engaging a bit sooner than I was ready. An incident that had no real bearing on the battle's outcome. I passed the battle sword over to Randolph, then confronted Red Baron. The rough terrain gave the enemy archers a huge opening advantage, especially when my initial formation placed Gyan and Claude at the rear, making wrestling with inhibited movement all the more of a struggle to get into proper formation. Taya was felled almost instantly, and Muddle made a quick mess of things. Needing to keep the pressure on, Kazan was basically left in the dust as the party fanned out into the plains. Suffering some losses, but overall pushing through. The worst thing that happened here was I lost Randolph to a raging inferno of attacks, costing me my power ring before the boss. After that, I backed off. My forces were too spread out to engage, given the danger of the Chaos Wizard's fire magic coupled with the evil bishop's healing. I needed to regroup so that I could take them out quickly. It would still be tough, especially since the wizard was likely to hit someone with Blaze level 4 when coming into range. Luckily, the Chaos Wizard performed literally the dumbest action available, turning a serious threat into a joke. Coming upon the final enemy group, I lured as many of them away from Red Baron as I could, grateful that I kept Kazan safe from the enemy bow rider, but lamenting when it was Peter who lured out the Hellhound. Making the best of that bad situation, I put Peter's flame resistance to good use by luring out the Minotaur, since he would fall to any other single attack anyway. Only the final few foes remained, but this fight was far from over. I spent a long time contemplating the best way to approach them, trying to arrange the best possible formation for advantageously initiating combat. That was when Red Baron ran out of patience, forcing my hand and placing him between both of his mages. The trees made it difficult to circle around to reach them, and when Kazan fell, I could no longer attempt to silence them. Thankfully, I still had Slay. With uninhibited movement, he did what ninjas do best. Slipping through enemy lines, he created a diversion that kept the mages busy. That was my saving grace, especially when the bishop healed himself instead of Red Baron. After a close shave with Diesel, victory was claimed. I grabbed the white ring for Bowie, then passed the protector ring to Chester. For mithril gear, I got a mist javelin for Chester, an atlas axe for Jaha, supply staves for Kazan and Taya that I didn't actually equip, a critical sword for Slade, a hypercannon for Rode, a Valkyrie and Holy Lance for Rick, and just a shit ton of heat axes from trying to get at least one ground axe, which I distributed between Jaha, Gyan, and Randolph for their blaze magic. I passed the power ring from Randolph to Claude, then it was time to challenge Geshup. While doing my best to bait enemies with my tanks, I tried detonating the burst rocks with as few units in their blast radius as possible. A couple detonated on their own, but didn't inflict irreparable damage. During the scuffle, Jaha ate a brave apple right after gaining a natural level, helping him catch up a bit. Once all of the burst rocks were defeated, I advanced on Geshup's group from the trees. Turns out that was a terrible idea. Geshup swooped in and instantly exterminated 2 of my best guys, while several others were stuck struggling to retaliate from the inhibiting terrain. I charged in as best I could, but absolutely could not allow Bowie anywhere near Geshup. He would be taken out in one freeze level 4 shot, but things were rough, so despite the risk, I got Bowie in there as Geshup's HP was getting low. Overall, a rather straightforward battle only made difficult by Geshup's deadly magic. After I fed Claude a chicken, Lemon came to us hoping to join us so that he may die heroically in battle. I passed his Sword of Darkness to Randolph, just in case I feel the need to use it for casting Diesel. I started the next battle by heading north to deal with the enemies up top, then worked my way back south. either sticking to the woods or making moves on foes whenever they came within an attack range that wouldn't compromise my advantage. A very by-the-numbers battle, especially for this late. Gave the evil ring to Taya, got the Force Sword, onward to Ark Valley, where I was confronted by Odd Eye, the strongest devil in Zeon's army, who turned out to be Adler, his strength and memories restored from the wounds suffered from Volcanon back in Bedeau. Cautiously advancing behind my tanks, the nearby demon was concerning because of his magic. Chester baited him so that his spell would only hit one target. He was covered by a Cyclops, but I had to move fast before he got another turn that could blast half my force with a single spell, so I threw caution to the wind to dispatch both of them quickly. From there I dispatched foes before they could strike by inching just close enough that they would only move 2 spaces closer, then charged before their next turn. A tactic I hoped to implement similarly against a Chaos Wizard, but his full speed charge decelerated when he got close. Peter took a hit because I was so focused on that wizard, as did Kazan and Peter again due to poor turn order. The damage to Peter was especially troubling since it put him in kill range for freeze level 4 from the Demon Master. That would make it very difficult for Peter to get close to Odd Eye. Now that I had a breather, I regrouped while Chester shook off some paralysis, then slowly crossed to the central bridge while wondering if I could safely coax the demon away from Odd Eye. I did some stress testing to figure out how well I could coax not just the demon, but any of the remaining devils away from Odd Eye. During which time, Chester traded weapons with Rick due to their differing health. No luck luring out the demon, so while everyone else slowly fought their way across the bridge, Peter flew into one-on-one combat against it. As I neared Odd Eye, the Demon Master blasted Jaha, but honestly I was perfectly fine with that in exchange for baiting him away from the boss. The fewer targets I had to contest simultaneously with Odd Eye, the better. Throwing caution to the wind, I pounced to not let that sacrifice be in vain. Shortly thereafter, Odd Eye stepped into the fray. Chester attacked, then baited the Hydra, and as much as I wanted Bowie to get in there, I couldn't risk him getting near Odd Eye recklessly. I focused on the Bishop whenever I could to prevent healing. With most of my force still intact, it was a simple matter of overwhelming Odd Eye with sheer numbers from there, although I was sure to pull Bowie to a safe distance, just to be safe. I returned Rick's and Chester's weapons to proper ownership before scaling the Ancient's Tower. Aside from Rick being seriously wounded, things were going fine until a surprise strike on the party from a demon's bolt magic. Road made sure that wouldn't immediately happen again, but the hardest part of this battle was avoiding massive damage from bolt level 2 while navigating these narrow walkways. The Demon Masters were also a concern, so I considered trying to bait them with either Jaha or Rick, letting my near-dead units soak up a freeze level 4, costing a unit or two, but ultimately saving on the party's overall hit points. As per usual though, the AI is kind of really dumb, voiding that threat for me. The rest of the battle was easy. Most of my losses were units who already had 1 foot in the grave when coming up to the climax. Or I suppose 3 in a Centaur's case. I went into the battle against King Gallum swinging. The power ring cracked right away, but the boost didn't go to waste. By the time I dispatched the initial enemies, the eastern squad was on the move. I arranged a defensive wall to welcome them, a trap that expectantly snared them, although I did suffer a bit from Gaian getting himself confused. The western squad was coming in next. I circled around to meet them in very much the same manner, although with a Demon Master among them, walling them off would be a bit trickier. But because the Demon Master and all his infinite Sega Genesis AI wisdom didn't use his magic, the wall held brilliantly. I tried attempting the next one with Rick's massive HP pool, but he had other plans. Even though it was risky, I couldn't let him get off another spell like that. I made a move, and was soon faced by King Gallum himself. The Blue Shaman was annoyingly beyond reach, but after he proved his idiocy, Gallum was defeated. I retreated to revive my fallen comrades and repair any damaged equipment, then returned for the final boss. Immediately, things did not go according to plan. The Pyro Hydra lasted long enough to negate my initiative against him, the Archdemon zapped Gaian instead of Rick, and the Devil Griffin reached Taya instead of going for Claude. I regrouped when they were all slain, then waited for a chance to swiftly dispatch the nearby Demon Master at Pyro Hydra. I took a troubling hit from the next Archdemon, and a gamble with Kazan didn't pay off. Thankfully, even though several units I would likely be needing in good health against Zeon weren't looking too hot, including a reckless laser blast to Peter, I didn't actually lose anyone on the eastern side of the map. While feeding the Zeon guard to Chester and Rick, I got an idea that I had never tried before. In a normal run, it always seemed too risky, but when I can't heal, I needed every advantage I could get. I told Road to shoot the Pyro Hydra across the gap, but not to take it out. I wanted to lure the Blue Shaman into wasting his magic points by healing it. When he didn't take the bait, I simply slew the Hydra then moved on. While Road was catching up, I cautiously engaged the Western force. Randolph narrowly survived, luring in a couple of targets, but I still managed without any casualties. Although many of my units were in no condition for taking on Zeon, his demon breath could wipe out much of my team in a single shot if I wasn't careful. Before that though, there were still a few minions to get through. The Demon Master seemed disinterested in joining his slain allies, so I waited for Road to catch up so he could shoot the second Zeon guard. Unlike Prism Flowers, Zeon guards never fire north or south, so I knew Road was safe. Even after the guard was dead and I inched closer, the Demon Master refused to engage. Until I was in range to make the first move myself, I waited for the Demon Master to waste his next turn, then rushed him before giving him another. As did I take out the Blue Shaman, who rewarded me with a healing rain as if to mock me. Now to pray that I had enough strength remaining to outlast Zeon, starting with getting Peter into position to attack him from behind, then powering him up. Road also engaged, trying to distract Zeon from Peter. But perhaps because of a counterattack that dropped Peter into kill range, that plan failed. From there, I just went for it, powering people up with the power ring for as long as it would last, and whenever possible, attacking in formations that allowed two fighters to be engaged at once without allowing Zeon to hit them both with one attack. That strategy rewarded Road plenty of hits, and Chester even scored a lucky double hit. But my forces were dropping like flies. The power ring finally cracked after its fourth use. After an amazing double attack from Randolph, I narrowly seized victory. Lemon sacrificed himself to drag Zeon back into the depths of darkness, and Bowie kissed Ellis to awaken her from a coma. The world was saved, and the game was completed. Or was it? Because I'm a crazy person, I decided to challenge the post-game boss rush battle, starting with luring the Dark Smoke, King, and Willard into elimination without running the risk of triggering any of the other bosses. I wasn't pleased that Kazan was hit by Blaze, but it couldn't be helped. I wanted to lure out Camila next, but my effort instead saw her retreated towards Geshup. So Road took out the first Prism Flower, then I set my sights on Zalbar. Gyan lured him out, then I defeated him before he got another turn. Next was Camila and Geshup, who I would have preferred to isolate. I tried using Jaha to lure them out, but Adai took the bait as well, turning the situation into a disaster. I couldn't quickly retaliate because of the terrain, and before I knew it, Gallum and Red Baron were engaged as well. At that point, the battle was over. Sure, the remaining Prism Flower finished off Camila and Geshup, but even if I did defeat the remaining three bosses before Bowie was killed, I wouldn't have had the strength left to fight Zeon, especially since my power ring was still damaged from the last battle, meaning I could only get one use out of it instead of 4. On my second attempt, Peter ensured that the king never got the chance to cast magic, and Chester was the one who baited Zalbard. Learning from my previous failure, I approached from the west. There was more room to maneuver over there, and hopefully it would allow for better isolation of the bosses. Inching forward slowly as possible to bait him in by the narrowest margin, I defeated Adai at the cost of only Gyan. But then before I was ready, Gallum was baited by Slade. Retaliation was my only choice. Although I took heavy damage, Gallum fell without claiming any lives. Then the pattern repeated with Red Baron, then again with Camila. Every time I wasn't ready, yet every time I had to fight back, lamenting how they were the ones baiting me closer to Zeon and Geshup. And sure enough, Geshup stepped into the fray like all the rest. Not only before I was ready, with some of my units off elsewhere from me trying to get into a better position, but placing the battlefield right in front of Zeon. I absolutely could not be dealing with anyone else while fighting Zeon. Luckily, he did step away from Zeon almost right away, allowing me to actually defend myself at the cost of Claude, meaning I would have to fight Zeon without my power ring, despite barely defeating him the first time with 4 uses from it, in addition to some lucky double attacks. Thankfully, I did have some boons. Many of my remaining fighters were in better condition than last time, including my heavy hitters like Peter and Randolph. After Chester killed the remaining Prism Flower, chosen to squeeze out one last level up, it was time to take down the Devil King once again. Like previously, I opened with Peter swooping in from behind. I backed him up with Slade's magic, hoping Zeon would go for the guaranteed kill instead of attacking Peter. He didn't take the bait, and after Peter missed with his second attack, things weren't looking too hot. What followed was a long string of sacrifices in which Zeon kept attacking my technically stronger units, ignoring the constant fire from Road, mounting additional damage from several shots I wouldn't have had if Zeon had gone for him instead. He did eventually target Road, but not until my highest damage dealer was his other option, allowing me to bring him down and miraculously claim victory. Thereby, Shining Force 2 was completed without healing or defensive boosts. Regarding any final thoughts, I don't really have many. This was an interesting challenge that definitely required me to put together a more defensive team than normal, and play much more meticulously to mitigate damage. Looking back on it, if there's one thing I would have done differently, I would have promoted Kazan into a sorcerer. I went into this figuring that I would get a lot more use out of Muddle and Dispel to compensate for the inability to heal. Sure, those spells did help on rare occasions, but their usefulness wasn't nearly frequent enough to justify being stuck with Blaze as Kazan's only reliable source of damage. But there you have it! If you enjoyed going on this journey with me, then be sure to do all the YouTube things, and I'll see you next time!